Hey guys, today we're going to unmask and unravel a charlatan, Destiny, Stephen Bennell, the Omniliberal, whatever call him. I'll talk today about 3 specific colossal errors of fact that Destiny has made in his commentary on the Israel-Palestine conflict specifically. And I'll also show how these errors were all used by Destiny to whitewash Israeli atrocities. When confronted with these errors, he uses dishonest debate bro methods. Destiny's first error is that on average, 90% of people killed in war are civilians. He uses this figure, this bogus figure, to argue that because the IDF is below 9-1, has a better, in other words, civilians to combatants ratio on average, that it couldn't be committing these atrocities it's accused of in this indiscriminate targeting.
Numbers don't support the idea that civilians are being targeted en masse. It doesn't even come close to it. I've seen estimates at anywhere it's like 9-1 for civilian to military deaths historically in conflict. And the idea that in the Gaza Strip, one of the most densely populated places on the planet, those numbers right now are, depending on whose estimates go, anywhere from 2.5-1 to like 4-1 in terms of civilian to militant deaths. So the idea that people are being wiped out with innocent family members, there just don't seem to be any numbers at all to support that.
The problem Destiny has is 9-1 is a completely bunk pop myth. It's been repeated by figures in the EU and the UN, but it's nonsense. It's way below 9-1, the average civilians to combatants killed ratio in both war and urban war. For example, the murderous Syrian army has a much lower civilians to combatants killed ratio than 9-1 in the current Syrian civil war. Utterly criminal siege of Aleppo had about a 3-1 civilians to combatants ratio. Stalingrad and Leningrad, much lower than 9-1. This is a ridiculous pop myth. And I'll link in the notes to an article by the international relations scholar Adam Roberts that comprehensively debunked this silly myth. When I confronted Destiny on the air, he initially seemed to admit he was wrong. So that's good, right? Here's the problem. He then backtracks from his admission and tries to withdraw it and then say, oh, because I, Matthew History Speaks, don't know the exact average ratio of civilians to combatants killed in war, that therefore I can't possibly say it's below 9-1. So how can you know really it's not 9-1 if you don't know the exact number, he said.
I don't know what the actual ratio is, though. Do you know what the actual ratio is?
Popular myth.
What is the actual ratio?
The literal ratio, I don't, no, I don't know the literal
he
actual ratio.
He doesn't even fucking know. Jesus Christ.
Correct. Just as one doesn't need to know what the average weight of a human being is to be certain it's way below 900 pounds, one doesn't need to know the exact average civilians to combatants killed ratio in war to know it's way lower, vastly lower than 9-1, as of course I do. As to the specific figure, no one really knows. It's disputed. So it's just a dishonest technique, and it shows 2 of his methods. And he's actually a skilled charlatan. I'm not saying he's without skill. It's not coincidence that he has been successful. The 2 methods here are pseudo-skepticism and subject changing. So he changes the subject on to what do you know, history speaks, are you a fraud or whatever. And then he uses like pseudo-skepticism. Like, how can we really know it isn't 9-1 if you don't know exactly what it is to the 8th decimal? So these are 2 core Destiny techniques in the Debate Bro Armory, techniques of a charlatan who doesn't care about learning, he only cares about winning as he sees it. And again, he used the 9-1 myth to deny atrocities, to deny indiscriminate killing of civilians, and specifically to deny Israel's Where's Daddy program of bombing individual Hamas militants when they were home and killing entire families, systematically killing families. He specifically argued that Israel couldn't be engaged in such a practice if it had a much better civilians to combatants killed ratio than average.
Where's Daddy, also revealed here for the first time, were used specifically to track the targeted individuals and carry out bombings when they had entered their families' residences. And 972 argues that the reason that you've seen so many women and children killed is that they were identifying men. Sometimes something like 10 to 20% of men in Gaza are named Mohammed. Like if you go through the Ministry of Health list of casualties, many of them have same last names because they're from the same family. So they're using AI to identify a particular man and then follow him to his home and then killing him with a bomb in his home. Oftentimes this is an apartment that doesn't just have his family sleeping there, but also has many other families sleeping there.
Which is where the Where's Daddy name comes for that program. They wait for them to be with their families, and they think it's easier to bomb them in their homes rather than try to fight them in the field, and where they're more difficult to find.
Well, so how could because of the field,
so how could this be worse? Try to design a government that behaves in a worse way than this.
The obvious counter is the numbers don't support the idea that civilians are being targeted en masse. It doesn't even come close to it. I've seen estimates at anywhere it's like 9-1 for civilian to military deaths historically in conflict. And the idea that in the Gaza Strip, one of the most densely populated places on the planet, those numbers right now are, depending on whose estimates you go, anywhere from 2.5-1 to like 4-1 in terms of civilian to militant deaths. So the idea that people are being wiped out with innocent family members, there just don't seem to be any numbers at all to support that.
He's absolutely wrong. Where's Daddy is a real program that existed. We don't only have the testimonial evidence, but we have the data from air wars showing homes were bombed again and again and again with huge munitions. We have research from myself and from others showing that a teeny percentage of Gazan families accounted for the majority of fatalities in the first 20 days and the first month or so of the war too. And this is something that only makes sense if families were being targeted as they were in the Where's Daddy. So completely wrong about a foundational premise, like whether 9-1 is average. It's something you need to know if you're going to make comparative statements about whether Israel is a discriminate or indiscriminate or criminal or moral military, which he's been doing for months. He's wrong about this. So the second Destiny error is that Hamas manufactured rockets from cookies. Almost hard not to laugh even saying this. That's why they prohibited the import of cookies in the early years of the blockade. Why would Destiny argue that rockets were made from cookies? It sounds wacky. Well, he did this, again, to whitewash Israeli atrocities. He wanted to deny the fact that the Israeli food blockade on Gaza, which had a very negative impact on the health of especially the children of Gaza, was a collective punishment scheme. He wanted to dispute that fact. He wanted to say it's all about security, and that's why they had to prevent, as he argued, cookies from coming in.
Here to Gaza, you know that it's not motivated by military.
Why were cookies being prevented from going in?
And
what were custom rockets fueled with?
Yeah, with cookies? Yeah,
with sugar and fertilizer. Yes, that's how they made the early rockets. The first generation that was literally used.
Here too, just like his false claim about 9-1 civilians to combatants killed ratio being average and more, his error about the cookie rockets served to whitewash Israeli atrocities. And of course, the problem Destiny has is laughable, like that rockets are made from cookies. Makes no sense, right? Wacky, ridiculous. But when confronted, Destiny just lied and said that he was proven right. And he noted that Hamas made rocket fuel from sugar. And citing this, he claimed victory. We got another bullshit debate bro technique. Subtly changing the subject from one thing to something different. This is actually a more technical way of putting it would be he's practicing the fallacy of division because cookies contain sugar, therefore cookies are sugar. That's what he's implicitly saying. But he's not actually saying this. He doesn't actually believe this. He's just trying to hoodwink his viewers into thinking that that's what the rockets are made from sugar. No, he said they were made from cookies. And cookies are not sugar just because they contain sugar, just as human beings are not water just because they contain water. Dishonesty used again to whitewash atrocities, namely the atrocity of the food blockade and the collective punishment. Partial food blockade. They didn't block all food, of course, but they were trying to put the Gazans on a diet to make them suffer while avoiding starvation deaths. That was the purpose of the policy. That's what the testimonial evidence shows. That's what common sense shows. Why else ban things like pasta? They literally banned pasta until 2009. And Destiny wants to deny this because he wants to deny Israeli crimes. Third Destiny error I'll mention. He's arguing that a UN report on the Great March of Return, which was a slew of demonstrations held usually on Fridays in Gaza near the border between March 2018 and December 2019, advocating the implementation of the right of return and also the end of the occupation. The report that Destiny is distorting said specifically it would study the period through 30 March 2018 and 31 December 2018. It studied 118 Palestinians who had been killed by Israeli forces during the march, and it only found that one of the shootings, the killings, was justified. And in order to excuse Israel, Destiny says, the only reason the report found that only one shooting was justified is that they were only applying a policing analysis. They were not applying a law of armed conflict analysis.
When Israel says that there are two events running in parallel, what they're saying is that there is an armed conflict happening in general between Hamas and Israel, and they're saying that there is an event that might be a policing event. These two events are running in parallel. Now, when the UN does their analysis of what's going on the ground, when they're opting for, you can basically analyze it as an IHL event or as a policing event. And for every single instance, except for one discrete event, they opt for the policing analysis. Now, what other people are saying, or History Speaks saying, what History Speaks is saying is that, well, no, they use both modes of analysis. No, they're choosing between both modes, and they opt for the policing one in every single circumstance except for one particular event. But they say under that event, this is probably like an armed conflict. We don't know if it's good or not under the armed conflict analysis because we're not doing an armed conflict analysis here. We're doing a policing analysis on everything everything else.
So the implication was that many of these people whom they said were unjustifiably killed were actually justifiably killed. That's what Destiny was saying. Destiny specifically invoked this argument to justify the killing of a 14-year-old child, this little girl you see here. Israeli snipers shot her in the head when she was trying to cut the Gaza fence with wire cutters. And Destiny said to me on stream when I described what she was doing, that this was definitely legally justified. So again, he's justifying child murder. And how does he do that? Given this compelling UN report, which says it was unjustified. He doesn't dispute the report or argue against it in this case. He simply says, no, the report just wasn't applying the framework of the law of armed conflict. And if they did, it would find that this little girl was a combatant, that she was a combatant and could be lawfully killed because she was running at the apartheid fence with a wire cutter. Destiny indicated the only reason the UN report found her killing unjustified is that they failed to apply a law of armed conflict analysis to her, and that she would have been considered a combatant had they applied. But this is utter rubbish. The UN report applied a law of armed conflict analysis to everyone Israel killed at the march. All of these 183 people, at least through 31st December 2018, including the little girl. And they found that only one of the fatal killings could be justified. Everyone else was unjustified. When I confronted him on the error, Destiny did another debate bro technique. He quoted the report at length in unnecessary ways. He used complex and technical language about parallel application. They did engage in parallel application, but you could just say in plain English, they applied both law of armed conflict and policing analysis or international human rights law analysis. Instead, he went off to the races with technical language, complex digressions, and long quotations from the UN document that were irrelevant. And again, this is just a strategy to avoid admitting he was wrong. He wasn't saying anything substantive. So as these three errors show, namely that first, the average ratio of civilians to combatants killed in war is 9-1. The second one was the cookie rockets. Oh my God. And then the third one, that the UN did not apply a law of armed conflict analysis to the killings at the Great March of Return. All colossal errors of fact and interpretation call into question his seriousness in this space. And more importantly, were used to whitewash Israeli atrocities. So 9-1 used to deny the Where's Daddy program of systematically killing the families of militants or killing militants when they were with their families, which we know happened beyond a reasonable doubt, really. Secondly, the cookie rockets to deny the food blockade was punitive in nature. And third, to justify the killing of innocent people, including this child I mentioned. He pretended that the UN report didn't invoke a law of armed conflict analysis to all the killed. Also, he used these debate bro techniques, such as changing the subject in a subtle way that prevents people from realizing that he's changing the subject when he's cornered. Sham skepticism. How can you know that the average ratio of civilians to combatants killed is way below 9-1 if you don't precisely it is? And then also long digressions and long and needless technical language. Look, it's depressing at some level that such an unethical and poorly informed individual has managed to make money and expand his platform off of denying crimes which are going to amount to murder under international law. So basically, by apologizing for murder, he's made money and expanded his platform. And maybe he's even influenced people's views. He probably has, actually. However, I think he's going to get his reputational consequences. I don't think people who've defended this massacre, this murder, are going to get away with it, with their reputations intact. I think he'll also try to run away from some of the things he said. He won't be able to do so entirely, but try to obscure what his positions were. Okay, ultimately, Israel's war crimes, the starvation strategy, killed scores of kids, the systematic bombing of families in their homes, the Where's Daddy program, the torture chambers. These atrocities are just way too extreme and well documented for people who apologize for them to get away with it. And when these atrocities come out, when they're made known to mainstream Western opinion, Destiny and the other apologists for these crimes will incur just and intense reputational damage. And I do, perhaps spitefully, very much look forward to that.